Hello and welcome to our London History Podcast, where we share our love of London, its people, places and history in 20-minute espresso shot episodes served with a dash of personality. I am Hazel Baker, qualified London tour guide and CEO of London Guided Walks, providing private tours, treasure hunts and live London quizzes to Londoners and visitors alike. To accompany this podcast, we also have hundreds of London history-related blog posts for you to enjoy at londonguidedwalks.co.uk/blog. And it's a week for celebrating, as we have hit the amazing milestone of 3,000 listeners. Now, I am beyond proud and thankful not only for you, my lovely listeners, but also for our expert guests for sharing their love of London. Now, don't forget, if you want to be a guest, then please do get in touch via our website, londonguidedwalks.co.uk/podcast. Also, for celebrating, this week I was a guest on the Robert Elms Show for BBC Radio London. Yes, again. This time talking about the nautical names of some streets of Islington, and I'll leave a link to that in this week's show notes. Don't forget, from 4th of July, we will be offering private tours, treasure hunts and live London quizzes to private groups, all COVID-19 secure. And now, on with the show. There's no denying that London is a cinematic city, with the meandering River Thames, instantly recognisable buildings such as St Paul's Cathedral, Buckingham Palace, Houses of Parliament and the skyscrapers of Canary Wharf. London is pretty hard to beat when it comes to the perfect city for film locations. Films shot on the streets of London include Paddington, Bridget Jones, James Bond's Skyfall, Mary Poppins Returns and Marvel's Doctor Strange, with also much-loved classics such as Genevieve, Alfie, The Lady Killers, Indiscreet and The Lavender Hill Mob. Joining me today to talk all things London in films is film critic and feature writer Richard Luck. Knowing your love of classic films, Richard, I'm guessing we're going to be sticking to the more timeless films rather than the modern-day blockbusters.
No, absolutely. I mean, I have a soft spot for things like Mary Poppins and that sort of Disneyfication of London. What I have more of a problem with is, say, a lot of American films will just use the same basic locations. It's Buckingham Palace, Palace of Westminster. And I mean, the American films I like best, by and large, that with regard to London, things like An American Werewolf in London, the John Landis film, where, you know, shooting in Tottenham Court Road Tube Station. I mean, walking around Tottenham Court Tube Station for years brought back sort of memories of that particularly compelling scene. And shooting in Regent's Park and at the zoo and things like that.
Yeah, and Southwark as well, by the Clink Prison Museum now. You know, that used to be a really run-down, dodgy area. I was doing a tour in Southwark and I just mentioned, you know, how atmospheric this place is, because it's somewhere that I used to walk through quite a lot when I first moved to London 20-odd years ago. Was not that how it is now? And I says, oh yes, An American Werewolf in London was filmed here. And one of the ladies piped up, she goes, I know, I was on this crew. I was like, really?
Really? Wow!
So I got
how good is that?
It's amazing, isn't it? You know, you just one little, you know, tidbit that you're giving, and then suddenly they open up on some of the best highlights of their career. It's just amazing. You know, it's amazing who you get on tours.
Yeah, who have you had?
Yeah, I've had Joss Whedon of Marvel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that was a private behind-the-scenes tour of late Victorian, early Edwardian Covent Garden.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so who knows what'll come out of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Covent Garden, the film I always go back to for Covent Garden is Frenzy, the Hitchcock thriller, because it's the last time you see Covent Garden as a working market rather than, you know, what it's become today. And with Hitchcock being the son of costermongers, of market people, it's really rather quite a loving portrayal. And that's the time capsule quality of film I love. I'm sort of late 40s now. When I first came up to London, say, to go to the Natural History Museum, the Natural History Museum was black. It was still sort of coated in, you know, soot and what have you. And I mean, now it shines and it's beautiful. It is. It's one. I think it's one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. But to be reminded of London as it was, if you watch, say, the Ipcress File, the wonderful Harry Palmer thriller, and it's also the Secret Service are based in Trafalgar Square. And it's a Trafalgar Square with, you could drive all the way round, and it looks very grey, but it's as it was, and it's as I first remember seeing it. Yes, it's much nicer now, but it was what it was, and it's nice to be reminded of that.
Yeah, I find film very, very useful because even though I might look at photos in archives, watching the films, especially the older ones when we're talking the 1950s, 1960s films, post-war, it's not the glam as the Notting Hill films that you get. It's all very real, especially that industrial bit. We forget how busy and dirty London used to be. We were a city of manufacturers.
I think that's the incredible thing when you say watch looking at films. I have one of my favourite movies. There was a discussion on Twitter the other day of great gangster films, and one of the ones I come is The Long Good Friday.
Yes,
and which is largely filmed in the docks before the reinvention of the rejuvenation of the docks. And it's amazing to see them working, but also the sort of the element of dilapidation, and it looked like an area that was. Well, what was ever going to happen there? And well, now we know what has happened there. But I like to be reminded, yes, this was the Thames was an artery. It wasn't just tourist boats and what have you. It was a major thoroughfare through the city. And that's actually one of the films I'm very fond of, Pool of London, which is a Basil Dearden film about a couple of shipmates who get off near HMS Belfast and proceed to sort of get into various scrapes in South London. And it's lovely to see, say, Greenwich Park, and it's also one of the first films to have it's quite chaste, but it's an interracial romance. And that's the other thing I love about London in terms of tolerance and in terms of being a cosmopolitan city. That's been the case for years. And I rather like in Pool of London, it's quite a small scale. It doesn't sort of pat itself on the back, but it's sort of marking that progress and that, those changes. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny you say about the Long Good Friday because one of our guys, Rob, he actually does a private Long Good Friday tour.
Oh,
Yeah, using photos, stills from the movie and sort of taking you back to exactly what the conditions would have been and, tidbits of the stories in the film. And it adds another layer. You don't see that now. You walk there and you don't see the same London anymore.
Well, it's funny. There's one talking about if I may mention television. There's one of the old Doctor Who's. I think it's Resurrection of the Daleks is shot in, and it's now. I mean, it's one of the plush. It's such a lovely little. It's sort of sandwiched between two old warehouses.
Yep.
And at the time they filmed that, it was on its last legs, and now it's the up-and-coming thrusting part of South London. But it's extraordinary to see somewhere outlive its first usage, which in that case was industrial, and now it's houses and restaurants and flats. It's progress.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest progresses I suppose we've seen from movies is, I don't know if you've seen Passport to Pimlico.
Yes, it's the newspaper I write for, the New European, which was a paper that was very pro-Remain. Passport to Pimlico has a rather sort of special place in our heart because it sort of talks about that sort of idea of independence. No, I absolutely love of the Ealings with a distinctly London bent. That's certainly my favourite.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of it was done in the studio, but the location bit, I'm in an hour, where is it? Because, of course, you can't just go back now and, the rubble's going to be there. But that's one of the questions I've been asked to talk about on this podcast is post-war London. And I think people forget that for decades that we were walking around in rubble.
Yeah.
And Passport to Pimlico, they actually chose a bomb site in Lambeth. And when I was having a bit of a read of it, I found it quite amazing that when they took the set down for the film, and they had to replace it as the bomb site had been found in order for the residents to get bomb site compensation.
Good Lord. Oh, that's what I love. I love things like that. But it is something to be reminded. I mean, I as I said, I love the London of today, the sort of the post-Olympics London. It does. It's so bright and brilliant. But yeah, to go back, I mean, that's incredible. To recover from what happened then. And I was going to mention Hope and Glory, the John Borman film, which Borman being a child of the Blitz. And I mean, good God, it's sort of become a romanticised period. And whereas that film is through the eyes of a child, is also a reminder that there was nothing romantic at all. And took some very tough people with a lot of resolve to get through it. And in fact, tough people being another thing with the East End. The Craze, the Peter Medak film. I like Legend, the Tom Hardy movie, but with the Craze, they shot because East London was changing. They shot predominantly in Greenwich, and it really does still have those sort of that exactly as it was, but it's a pretty good approximation. And yes, the gangster films, crime films, they lend themselves very well to that sort of post-war environment.
Yeah, I love the Lavender Hill mob as well.
I don't think I could love anyone who didn't. Even the end, because, I mean, you sort of want them to get away with it. You speaking about Lavender Hill Mob, I mean, also the Lady Killers. I lived in Camden for years and sort of saw the rejuvenation of King's Cross, but to see it then, yeah, I rather like to be reminded of a London that doesn't take itself too seriously. And I suppose actually that's what the Paddington films have done really well as well. They've captured a London, yes, it's the London of now, but just being in London is like being in a time machine. You can see the future sort of being thrown up around you, but my God, I mean, a lot of surprises to be found under the soil and under the streets. It's great. And again, another wonderful ending because she does get away with it. And who could begrudge her that? It's great.
Yeah, I was looking at trying to piece a few of the pieces together of what we can see now in London from what was in the film. So I was walking around, you know how there's the back end of King's Cross where you've got all the redone area of Refinery Square and that, but it also goes round where the lighthouse is at the front of the station, King's Cross.
Yes, I know exactly where you mean. Yes.
And then it goes across Euston Road, and they have to stop and make a phone call from a phone booth, of course. I mean, one of those. And there's a B&B in the movie. You know, that's where they're standing.
That's right, yes, yeah.
And so I went there, and you know what? It is still a B&B.
Really? Oh, what? What are the odds? That's fantastic. It's funny, one filmmaker I think does a very good job of both London, but in particular sort of King's Cross and Euston Road is Neil Jordan. And Neil is actually he's a Dubliner, and he's not terribly fond of London. However, he shot Mona Lisa, which was all around the sort of the King's Cross as was, and the Crying Game as well. And he shot around those small. I'm sure they're not seedy hotels. I'm sure some of them are very nice, but he filmed a lot around there. And yeah, oh my God, though, that's a real blast from the past, isn't it? To still be sort of in that line of work all those years on. Oh, wonderful.
Well, and also, you might not know, but Dr. Crippen, who was executed for found guilty of murdering his wife, Cora Crippen, well, he had his romantic liaisons with his mistress in one of those not-so-seedy hotels in King's Cross.
And, of course, played by Donald Pleasance quite wonderfully on screen.
No, I think there's also the more subtle villains as well. I would say Michael Caine in Alfie.
Yeah.
He's a villain in my book.
He is. He is. Sorry to sort of turn this into lots and lots of name dropping, but I interviewed Vin Diesel. I used to live in Australia, and he was touring. He was Triple X, which isn't a terribly good film, but he was perfectly pleasant. His favourite film is Alfie, and he said it's because it's a. Sorry?
The original or the remake with?
No, the original. Sorry, no, the original. He even does a frankly terrible Michael Caine impression, but he just said it's a very interesting film about being a man and being a young man about town and the discovery of actually what I like about Alfie is at the end he does realise he's been callous and unpleasant, a bounder and plenty of other things beyond. And the price of that, as he says, is I don't have my peace of mind. And it was quite interesting hearing the big. This was when Vin Diesel really was at sort of the peak of his powers, and his favourite film was a film I would not have expected. But no, I think Caine is a wonderful villain. He's brilliant actually in Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
Where he's only in it a few times, but it's quite nice. One of the scenes, I believe, is shot just round the corner from where he was raised in Rotherhithe. It's
there's a blue plaque there.
There is a blue plaque. I used to see it on the bus. I lived in Catford for quite a while, and as I came into London up to sort of Jamaica Road and so on, I remember seeing the plaque there. Yeah, quite right too. Sir Maurice is yes. You can't have London film being talked about without talking about Michael Caine.
No, absolutely. I mean, he did A few London movies now. I'm trying to think of the other one he did.
Well, even more recently, things like Harry Brown and so on. What I like is he doesn't sort of sentimentalise London. I'm sure he'd be wonderful in sort of Richard Curtis world, but his films do tend to be sort of that much, looking at the sort of the harder aspects of life in general and city life in particular. So I'm just trying to. There was another film of his. As I said, actually, although he's a hero in the Ipcress File, he's a very sort of buttoned down, atypical hero. And I always get very annoyed because people sort of talk about him being, he always plays himself. And, well, if he does that, he's a fascinating man. But I think he does an awful lot more than that. He's a wonderful actor. And although it's not a London film, I could sit down and watch The Man Who Would Be King every day and maybe twice on Sundays and be very happy.
Well, I'm just thinking, Michael Caine, it's Batman. Batman Begins, the very opening scene, it's supposed to be in Gotham, and that's actually filmed in Bloomsbury.
Yes. I was thinking of An Education, the Lon Scherfig film with Carey Mulligan. And there, it's a pleasant film. I liked it. But what was wonderful, it's one of the last films to be shot at Walthamstow Dog Track. Mm-hmm. And they also, they stop at, when I used to walk through sort of Bloomsbury, there was that little garage.
Oh, yeah, which
I can't.
Yes.
Yes, that's yeah. And it's great to see, which again has gone now. And it's lovely, though, that film actually sort of captures those places. Whenever I've seen that film, and as I say, it's perfectly charming, but it's great to be reminded. I had some very good fun evenings at Walthamstow Dogs, and nice to see it again. Nice to be reminded.
Oh. And my very final question for you, Richard, is maybe the hardest one of all, but what is your favourite London film?
It's actually a film that isn't entirely or even predominantly set in London, but Withnail and I.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's quite a stereotype. That's an answer you must get a lot, but it's a Camden movie, even though parts of it are shot sort of near the Trellick Tower because Camden had changed so much. To see Richard E. Grant reciting Hamlet in front of the wolves. The wolves are no longer there. There are giant anteaters in their place, which would make a very surreal image.
Well, I thought you dealt with that very admirably, so well done, because I would still not be able to choose.
No, right. I didn't realise that was an option. I'd have said,
question. Oh, Richard, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for taking the time. I've had a ball.
Thanks, Hazel.
If you've enjoyed this episode, then please do take a few moments and leave a review. It is very much appreciated. Thanks again, and see you next time.